Mucha gente ha supuesto que siempre tener más opciones es ser mejor, que la diferencia entre la riqueza y la pobreza de un individuo tiene que ver con la cantidad de opciones y de alternativas que tiene. No es lo mismo llegar a una tienda y decir solo existe esta marca, existe esta multiplicidad de marcas. Pues Barry Schwartz nos provoca con su pensamiento y nos dice, señores, hay una paradoja de la elección. Más es menos. Muchas veces nos complica más la existencia y nos hace menos felices. Escuchemos a esta mente provocadora que nos va a acompañar el 6, 7 y 8 de noviembre del año 2009 en Puebla, en el reconocidísimo Festival Internacional de la Ciudad de las Ideas. Quédese con nosotros.
Barry Schwartz, profesor experto en teoría de la acción social de la Swathmore College, cuyo campo de intervención ha sido establecer el vínculo estrecho que existe entre la psicología y la economía, particularmente analizando los procesos de toma de decisiones, la creación de valores y la interacción entre el egoísmo y la moral. En su libro The Paradox of Choice, Why More is Less, nos deja el mensaje de que a mayor opción, más confuso y menos feliz es el individuo.
Barry, thank you very much. It's an honor to have you in our program. Tell us the paradox of choice. Why more is less? The first question I have, many people have assumed that one of the most important things in our life is to have options and to have the opportunity and to become a freedom people in a way. But here you're like shifting our paradigm. Could you elaborate a little bit on this?
Absolutely. So this assumption that freedom is incredibly important, that's true.
Sure.
And the assumption that people should have options, that's also true. The mistake that we have made is that since we know that some freedom and some choice is good, we've assumed that more is better, that you can never have too much. And why wouldn't you think that? It's only recently and only in affluent societies that people have actually tested the limits. And now, certainly in the United States, the amount of choice is so overwhelming that what happens is that instead of being liberated by it, people are paralyzed. They don't know how to choose, they don't know what to choose, and they end up choosing nothing.
Barry, please, you started the book with an example of your own experience going to Gap, to this place for the jeans. Could you tell us and share it with us?
So I wear blue jeans all the time, and I buy them very infrequently because I don't like to buy new ones and break them in. So I hadn't been shopping for jeans in a while, and I went to the Gap. You have the Gap.
Yes.
And I told them my size, and the clerk said, do you want slim fit, easy fit, relaxed fit, boot cut, tapered, button fly, zipper fly, stone washed, on and on and on it went. And I said, I want the kind that used to be the only kind. So the problem, there were two problems. One is that the clerk was probably 12 years old and he had no idea what they were. Second, surely they didn't make that kind anymore. So I ended up spending 45 minutes trying all the different kinds on, and I walked out with the best fitting pair of jeans I had ever owned. I did better, and what surprised me, I felt worse. And it wasn't because I had spent 45 minutes instead of 5 minutes. What happened was, it took me a while to realize this, is that when there were only a few options, I didn't expect to get a pair of jeans that would be perfect. But when there are dozens and dozens of options, well, now one of them should be perfect. And what I got was good, but not perfect. So I ended up wanting this and getting this and feeling disappointed, feeling like I'd made a mistake. In the old days, I'd want this and I'd get this. I wouldn't do as well, but I did as well as I expected to do. So this really led me to write the book.
And important. I saw in your book many examples when you go to a grocery store, when you go to the supermarket. Wherever you go, you have thousands of options,
Yes.
or many options, and sometimes that creates, like Albert Camus says, a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
However, at the end, this has to be with happiness, and it has to be, I think, with what makes us, well, much more satisfied with life. My question, it has to do with what do you expect, what we expect. The first question is, why do you think that they are offering you much more options? Why you go to Starbucks and you can find 77 combinations and they make you feeling up that you are unique, that there is one special size for you and that you're different than anybody else? Mm-hmm. They have studied the mind of human nature and they are giving you a lot of options because they know how to exploit you in a way. But, or you don't think they have been thinking, well, this is going to help my sales?
No, I think they didn't. They assumed that it would help their sales.
Okay.
And they assumed it just like the rest of us. Since we know that choice is good, more choice has to be better. So why not offer all these options? Then everybody who walks in will be able to find something. If you
Sure.
only have a few options, a few styles, a few cuts, then some people won't like the way they look, they'll walk out with nothing. This way everybody gets something. And the important thing, and economists talk about this all the time, if there are 3 different kinds of cereal and you're happy with just those 3, and I add a 4th, it doesn't make you any worse off. You keep on choosing the 3 that you always chose. But the person across the street doesn't like those 3, here's a 4th, he's better off. So adding options makes nobody worse off, and it makes somebody better off.
That's the assumption.
That's the assumption, and it's a perfectly reasonable
Sure.
assumption. It just turns out not to be true. That even though you're happy with these 3 cereals, when you see another one, you scratch your head and you say, maybe I should try that one. And if there are 30 cereals, you walk down the aisle, and, how about that one? How about? So you end up either unable to choose, or you choose and you wonder whether you could have done better if you'd made a different choice. So there's a price to be paid by giving people all this choice. And my experience, after the book came out, I've given lots of talks. I talked to various industry groups, and I hear again and again and again, not just in the supermarket or in the Gap, we gave our customers 1 million options, and they did this, and they walked out with nothing. And so they learned the hard way that less is better, less is more. They certainly wanted to increase sales, and they made the perfectly reasonable assumption that this was the right way to do it, and it's not. And not only do you increase sales when you limit options, but it also costs you much less to produce, market, stock, all of the back of the store expenses go down if the inventory you have to manage is small.
You're right. For example, when you go to Harvard, how many courses you have to?
That's right. There are I don't know, 500 courses that you can choose from. You have to choose 4 or 5 out of 500, and 1 million different things to specialize in. And if none of the specialties suit you, you can make your own. And of course, we think we're doing everyone a favor with this, but what we do is we torture kids. And I think you see a lot of the anxiety and depression that we see in modern affluent societies comes, at least in part, from people not having any idea what they want to do or how to find out what they want to do. It's more freedom than human beings can handle. So it ends up undermining happiness instead of contributing to it, and who would ever have thought it?
My question is, in a way there is an optimal, a marginal benefit
That's right.
and a marginal cost, but how can you define what's actually the optimal quantity in a way, for example, for books, for courses, for how can we define that? Or that's a market study that teach?
I think that there's no simple way to do it. I think now that we know that there is an optimum and it isn't the more the better,
Yes.
it creates a task for researchers, university researchers or people out there trying to sell products to figure out how many options is the right number of options so that everybody can find something and nobody is paralyzed and frustrated. And it may be that if with cereals that number is 10, and with dishes on the menu in a restaurant that number is 12, there's no reason to think it's going to be the same number for everything. And plus, people are different from one another. You might like more options than I do, so I don't think you can find a formula that will make everybody happier. But you can identify a range where when you're in the range, you increase people's well-being, and when you exceed that, when you go outside that range, you actually make people worse off.
Yes,
and it's worth finding out what that range is.
And when we're talking about, as you mentioned it, about wines or clothes or whatever, it's one thing. But when we talk about love, it's different.
Yes.
If you know someone and you always think, well, what will happen if the next person that I date, it's actually better than this one? And the next one and the next one. So we start having a lot of problems with commitment. We start having a lot of problems with happiness and expectations. Mm-hmm. Have you ever thought about this topic much more involved, not on when do I get married? What do you think about this in this sense?
I think that, I don't have evidence for this, but I think that one source of the lack of commitment that we now see is that when people get involved romantically, each of them is looking over the other one's shoulder just in case there's somebody better walking by. So you mentioned Dan Gilbert's study with decisions that you can reverse. Well, when marriages are not reversible or hard to undo, divorce is difficult. What happens is that when couples hit rough spots, they work through them because it's easier to work through them than it is to undo. When it's easy to undo the marriage, then it's just not worth the trouble to work through the rough spot, particularly since you're noticing all these attractive people walking by, you know? So I think it has a lot. I think the reason that relationships break up is that people are always wondering whether there's somebody better. And the reason that they don't even form is that commitment means, it's sort of like when you graduate from college, you got to decide what career. You commit yourself to one person, and all these other people, including people you've not yet met, are no longer available. And you want to make sure that this is the perfect person. What the hell is the perfect person? I don't know what that is.
What makes us choose? What it means for you? What's going on when we choose something, and then we could decide if we have this paradox.
But this research area that I'm in, this judgment and decision-making field, has shown that people are influenced by things that they have no idea they're influenced by. So that, yes, you're choosing, but you're choosing because I've manipulated your environment to nudge you in this direction rather than in that direction. And you don't even, you don't know what you think you chose for this reason, you really chose for some other reason. If I said you really chose for that other reason, you would deny it. That had nothing to do with why I chose. And so that's what that suggests, is that this notion of rational choosing, which has been a part of Western philosophy forever and is at the heart of economics. Economists assume people have preferences, they know what they want, and then markets give them what they want. Well, none of those things are true. I mean, people don't have preferences until you ask them, usually. If I ask you, do you prefer orange jam or lemon, you may never have thought about it. That doesn't mean you'll be able to answer the question, but it's not like you look up your preference, you invent it on the spot. So they don't have preferences, and they don't make rational decisions. They make decisions that are influenced by non-rational factors, so they're semi-rational decisions. You can overcome this to some degree. Some people are better at it than others, but the word choice implies autonomy, freedom, and reflection, and much of the time, none of those things are actually present. And I must say, it saves us. The only thing that gets us through the day in modern society is that a lot of the choices we make are just by habit. Why am I doing it today? Because I did it the same way yesterday. If you actually thought about every choice you make in the course of a day, you'd be completely paralyzed. Should I brush my teeth or not? Should I put on my left shoe first or my right shoe first? I mean, there are a million choices that we make, and if we thought about them, we'd never get out of bed in the morning. So habit saves us to a large degree, but there's nothing rational about habit. That's the accident of your particular history. You have one set of habits, I have a different set of habits. There's nothing rational about them.
Now that we understand, or you describe now human nature, with your information, with your baggage, what should we do in terms of what's next?
Well, there are a few things. So as you pointed out, people make bad choices. You know, in a free society, you're reluctant to prevent people from making bad choices. But you can make it harder for them to make bad choices and easier for them to make good choices by manipulating the environment so that people are nudged in this direction rather than in that one. If people had been nudged into saving a little bit more every week, instead of being nudged into spending everything they earned and what they didn't earn, then part of the economic disaster that we now face in the United States would have been reduced. But again, you can't force people to save, but you can nudge them. And I don't think that we can simply dictate to society in general. I mean, there may be some things where you dictate because everyone is affected, and it's appropriate for the state, ideally a democratic state, to say, listen, this is how we're going to do things. But by and large, you have to let people make their own decisions. You just want to make it so that